AI isn't some distant, far-off thing. I mean, it's already here. Music libraries are starting to add AI clauses into their contracts. Copyright and PRO issues are turning into a legal minefield. And on top of that, AI-generated music is absolutely flooding the streaming platforms, making it harder than ever for any real composers to stand out amongst the sea of bots. And so when I recently sat down with Timothy Andrew Edwards to talk about trends for 2025, AI was such a huge topic that I knew it needed its own episode. Now, if you'll remember, Tim is one of the most accomplished and versatile media composers working today, working with NBC, Universal, CBS, ABC, Fox, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Lionsgate, and that's just to name a few. So whether it's songwriting, whether it's television or film, he understands how shifts in technology affect working composers. Because AI isn't going away, and composers who ignore it do so at their own peril. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Kropf, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Cues podcast, your weekly insight into the world of production, library, and sync music. Whether you're just starting out or already seeing your cues on TV, I promise you, you're in the right place. Today's episode is made possible thanks to the support of our member subscribers at 52 Cues, who are composers just like you, working to write better cues and succeed in the production music industry. And 52 Cues is helping make this a reality through live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, pitching to real music library briefs, and a ton more. So if you're curious about joining us, then you can head over to 52cues.com, or be sure to stick around because I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later in today's episode. Speaking of today's episode, I'm happy to welcome back to the podcast, Timothy Andrew Edwards, because when we talked a few weeks ago about trends in 2025, AI was such a big topic that I knew that it was going to need its own episode. So today, we're talking about how AI is already starting to affect gigs and contracts and the industry as a whole. So what can composers like us do to kind of future-proof? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about. Plus, a little bit later, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on a cinematic tension cue written by 52 Cues friend Russ Westfield. But first, what have I been working on lately? Well, I just put the finishing touches on the third out of 10 modern comedy cues that I'm writing for Discovery Channel. This one is called Bake It Till You Make It, which is, for like cooking shows and that kind of thing. And so it's kind of a mixture of dramedy with pizzicato strings and marimba, but also modern elements that you might hear like electric piano and guitar and maybe even a little whirly. So here is Bake It Till You Make It. So that was Bake It Till You Make It, and had a lot of fun writing that, especially, doing the guitar stuff and using my whammy bar on my Strat for the first time. That was a real adventure. So for you family and friends subscribers, if you want to see a complete cue breakdown, including the harmonic choices and the sounds and the mix and everything else, then be sure to be on the lookout for that here coming up soon. But let's go ahead and shift gears, because I want to get back to my conversation with Timothy Andrew Edwards. We talked earlier about trends for 2025, and I knew that we had to spend more time with AI and spending a whole episode on AI. So I want to pick up things right where we left off and talk about how AI is already changing the landscape of production music and what to watch out for moving forward. Hey, I want to ask you on one more trend, and then I promise I'm going to let you go. As the chair of the PMA Composer Committee, one of the things that I noticed, you're the chair, I'm not. Well, so let me get my syntax correct.
Let me say this. Andrew Gross is the current chair, so we're all kind of taking turns, but I did it for a long time, but I'm still involved. But yes, I just want to give the proper...
You're still heavily involved in the PMA.
Mm-hmm. I love the PMA.
Having come back from the conference in the fall, AI was a massive topic. And I know we could do an entire show on where in the hell is AI going and what are we doing with it. But here in the last couple of minutes that we have together, where do you see AI, how it's like the responsible way to use it? What do we think is going to happen? What are the AI trends for 2025? I'm just going to put you on the spot.
It's like the alcohol things, like drink responsibly, right? Use AI responsibly. Right. There was a lot of discussion there, and I have to tell you, in the first week of 2025, we were offered a gig, and then it got pulled within 12 hours because of AI. Now, that being said, it was a producer who had made this short film, who had a relationship with a music supervisor I work with, and the music supervisor called me and said, "I want to give you guys a crack at it. He just needs it's this track here, and he needs something that feels the same way. It's got to be the same tempo because he already cut the end credits to this music." But he also likes the feel of it. So we don't want it copied, but we want something that feels like, it'll make you feel the same way as when you hear it watching the temp track, right? So we're like, I listened to it and I said, yeah, we can do this. This will be great. And it was just like, it was more like kind of a favor thing, kind of a low fee or whatever, but, yeah, we'll do it. And, I got a phone call the next morning and he said, "Did you start on it yet?" And I was like, "Gee, we just talked at 9:00 last night, dude. I mean, it's not like
brother got to sleep, man.
Just had my cup of coffee. I mean," but he was like, but don't start it. And I was like, "Why?" He goes, "I'm a little distressed, but he goes, basically, this guy took the track, commercial track, put it into AI, and generated, like 12 different versions, and like the one version, he thought it worked, so he's going to use that." And so we lost the gig within like 12 hours, right? But as my business partner pointed out, he goes, that's a level, like, here's the thing. If you're a filmmaker, like, look, everyone likes to save money. I get it. But there's filmmakers who will do what's best for their film. And there's filmmakers who will want to keep the budget low. And you can usually spot the differences pretty easily. So he's like, think of it as we kind of dodged a small bullet. He had some named people in the movie, but it was just a short. I'm sure he's trying to get a feature made or something like that. And maybe for his purposes, it'll work. But as I told the music supervisor, there's lawsuits around about people using commercial music to train AI. And, if that can be traced back to this filmmaker, not that it would, it's kind of like, I always make the analogy of driving your car, right? You need insurance to drive a car. a lot of people drive without insurance, and most people don't get into accidents. But my God, if you get into an accident, you want to make sure you have that insurance, right? So
That's right.
it's the same thing with using AI or doing anything that's kind of skirting around things. I feel like, if there was kind of an issue with it and they were able to trace it, it's and they showed that you didn't want to pay the money to license the song, so instead you popped it into this thing and created a derivative of it. I think it's bad news. So as far as AI goes, currently you can't copyright it, so there's really no way to monetize that. And someone at the PMC rather, the PMA is PMC, the Production Music Association's Production Music Conference, in the audience asked, in this culture, don't you think that executives are going to want to save money? And my honest answer to that is I've never met an executive that wanted to save money. I've only met executives who wanted to make money. And so if they have, some studios and some production companies have arrangements like whether it's work for hire situations where they own the publishing, or to use the catalog, they'll participate in publishing. They won't own any of it, but they'll get an income stream from it, like a percentage of it or something like that. If they're going to use AI, that goes away. So at least in the short term, I'm thinking that that's probably a thing, and that'll keep it at bay a little bit, because and the funny part is that I think is hysterical is that there's now AI programs that can detect if something was made with AI. It's like AI telling on itself,
I saw a great Ben Jordan video that talked about that. Like, he's kind of cracked the code on the compression algorithm that AI, like Udio and Suno uses. And like he said, with 100% accuracy, he can detect AI generated music.
Yeah. I mean, like Disney currently won't accept anything like generated from AI. They won't even accept a lot of stuff like if you use Splice and things like that, right? They want it all sourced and original. It's Disney. It's their brand. They don't want to hear like sound-alike-y loops of something from somewhere,
Right.
So I don't know. Like, I think, what is a responsible use? Like, I have some mastering stuff that uses AI. It's not great yet, but it probably will get pretty good. But that also, well, here's the thing. I master most everything myself, at least on the production music side. But if I have a really big project, would I tend to use this, or am I going to go hire a mastering engineer, right? So that takes potentially something away from them. So, I don't know, man. What are your thoughts on it? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think it's in such a nascent stage right now. And I think that the music industry, especially the media music industry, is doing much better than like the photography and video industry, who got their lunch eaten before they could put the genie back in the bottle, right? And so now, if Adobe is trying, and Getty and Shutterstock, who are about to merge, are suing, OpenAI and the AI. And so it's all mired in litigation. But I see like BMI refusing to assign royalties to anything AI generated or anything that contains AI assets. And I think that's a firm line that we should be taking. And to my knowledge, BMI is the, if not the only, they're at least the first to take such a hard stand against it. But
that's incredible.
That having been said, I think there's got to be a middle ground where composers can use these tools, much like splice loops, not in a way to be the foundation of a creative process, but as a tool. What that looks like and what the legalities are, I think are it's way too early to tell. But I'm not ready to fire it into the surface of the sun, but I'm also not ready to call it like the future, because I think there has to be a way, because it's not going away. You know what I mean? And I think there is a part of it that's adding to the overall devaluation of music, but that's been going on since Napster, right? And so,
Yeah.
So my take is, It's probably too early. I don't think we need to all jump on the bandwagon and just start cranking out. I mean, there's all kinds of massive, that Ben Jordan video I mentioned earlier, the idea was how much like AI generated music is getting just fire hosed into like Spotify and the DSPs. And it's becoming a problem. My wife, who is a music director and a musician, but also a graphic designer, she saw that blow up a year ago in the stock photography space,
Right.
to where before Adobe had gotten a lid on it, it was impossible to find anything you needed. I need a picture of a Christmas tree on a snowbank, right? And then you would just be inundated with so much just AI generated drivel that it became untenable. Adobe came in and is still working to clean it all up, and you can sort by what is and isn't AI, but we're kind of in the Wild West space. And on one hand, we have companies like Suno who are partnering with like producers like Timbaland and name brand musician and producers who are coming out strongly in favor of it. But on the other hand, we have like BMI who is coming strongly against it. And composers are in the middle feeling like that's like the Langoliers come to mind. I don't know if you read Stephen King or whatever, but there's a short story called The Langoliers where it's this crunching noise is slowly coming for us. And that's what I feel like. I feel like if we don't adapt, we're going to end up getting left behind. And so the last thing I'll say about it is I don't think AI is going to replace composers, but I think composers who can learn how to ethically and responsibly and legally leverage AI tools are going to replace those who refuse to adapt. It might take 15 years, it might take 20 years, but that's any other technological, every other technological innovation, whether it's the printing press or whether it's notation software or the DAW,
right?
Every innovation that came along, the people who embraced it are the ones who survived it.
It's just
I'm
a matter
trying to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I would say too is that, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I think the one thing that the legal world needs to really look at is getting what they call name and likeness laws to be recognized worldwide, just like copyright is recognized worldwide. It's not going to stop it from happening, but at least it'd give people recourse. Because I had one of our composers who's very experienced one time send me a vocal track, and it sounded like The Weeknd. And I said, who is this? And he's like, oh, I got this vocal overlay, AI vocal of The Weeknd. I'm like, you absolutely cannot use that. He's like, yeah, I mean, why not? I was like, because it's The Weeknd's voice. And, the thing is this, one, I don't want to work that way,
Right.
One. Two, it's a violation of name and likeness laws or right of privacy or whatever you want to call it. Record labels have it as a name and likeness in their contracts. But there's a couple of things protected under name and likeness. Besides your name and your likeness, Dave, your signature is protected by name and likeness. So when you see like this mug, right? We have his name, we have his likeness, we have his signature, 3 licenses, right? All for a coffee mug. And, but the other thing that's protected is your voice, right? There's a very famous case where Bette Midler in the 80s, and it's actually popped up recently, but in the 80s sued Ford Motor Company because they approached her to sing a jingle. And she's like, I don't do jingles. I don't lend my name out for advertising or whatever. And so they just kind of went around her, found one of her backup singers that unknowingly didn't know that Bette Midler had, and they said, hey, we want to hire you to sing this jingle. We just need you to sound like your boss. Who she did sound like her boss because that's why she was hired, so they could blend. And it was a song it was a cover song, but it was a song that Bette Midler had put on one of her albums. And so they went ahead and did it to the point where colleagues of Bette Midler's manager were calling the manager going, hey, what's going on? I thought Bet didn't do any commercials or anything. He's like, she doesn't. We didn't. It's like, well, there's this Ford Motor Company. Turn on your TV, dude. She's right there. And so there was a lawsuit. Initially, Ford and the advertising agency won, but they appealed it and they came back. And the whole thing was based off of the recognition of voice. And so the one thing that kind of put it over the top for the jury was, if an old friend of yours, and this is before internet, before Zoom, all this stuff, right? If an old friend of yours that you hadn't seen in 5 years called you up and you're on the phone with them for 2 seconds, they're like, hey, what's going on? You recognize that voice. You're like, Bill, where have you been? Right? Like there's a recognition factor, just like a fingerprint, just like anything, your face, whatever. So that being said, like people should be very careful about what they're using from AI. The thing with AI that's scary to me is that it can't do anything on its own. It has to be trained off of things, and that brings in a lot of copyright issues. And you don't want to be the AI person. You know, if you send stuff into a library and they're like, you know, you sign off and they're saying it's original and whatever, and they put it up there and then someone finds out that it's AI, you know, you don't want to get blacklisted and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you're not just torching your own relationship. You're torching the relationship that library had with the client who trusted them.
Yes.
Now let me throw a wrench into all of this.
Yes.
We have like a service like Audemy, right? Which has licensed, and to my understanding, if I'm reading the TOS, they actually pay royalties to the vocal talent who have trained their models. So they have hired singers to come train their models. They have compensated the singers, and every time you use their singer for a project, you don't have to pay royalties, but Audemy pays royalties. And that's that weird liminal space that I think is going to need to get sorted out, because on one hand, it kind of goes against the legal argument of illegally using copyrighted materials to train your models. But on the other hand, it's also like, it's not my voice. And is it essentially using a guitar pedal, right? Is it essentially using like a vocoder, just a significantly more sophisticated? Or are we in that kind of AI asset middle place that like BMI isn't going to touch with a 1,000-foot pole? Whoa. Yeah, this has nothing to do with trends. I'm just curious what you think.
Well, it kind of is, because it's you know, it's should we use it or shouldn't we use it? You know,
yeah.
I do think there's a space for people to be able to license their name and likeness, just like they do with anything. You know, like the Hendrix mug here, right? This is an officially licensed thing. It says so at the bottom. You know, so just like the image, you know, would Jimi Hendrix like to know that he's on the side of a coffee mug in this day and age? Who knows, right? Maybe not. But I do think
the state got to make that call for him.
The state made the call for him, right? So you can't pick your family, as they say, right? But then again, I bought the mug. So I do think that there are ways to utilize it. Like if you can, if The Weeknd wanted to do, you know, a vocal overlay thing where you could license it and he got royalties based off of it, maybe upon approvals, to make sure that they weren't putting out something horrendous, you know, with your voice on it where people can't tell. That's the other danger, you know. But I will tell you this. I think for the production music world, when you're signing to a library, I think a good question, especially if it's the first time you're signing with them, is what's your stance on AI as far as, you know, what we're talking about in this agreement? Because we've been signing sub-publishing deals, you know, as the team. We have one in the Netherlands, one in South Korea, a couple other places where we're kind of still doing that. And we received a very nice offer from this country and this one sub-publisher in Europe. And everything looked fantastic in the agreement. But we caught this one clause that said that, which just blew my mind, is like, you allow sub-publisher name, who's nameless, to use your catalog to generate derivatives, you know, AI derivatives, blah, blah, blah. There was nothing in there about compensation. There was nothing in there about anything, you know, other than they had the right to do it. And we called them out on it and said, we'll sign the deal, but take that out. And, we went back and forth and they're like, this is just part of our business model. We're like, we're not going to do it because you don't want to be writing a bunch of cues for a library only to find out that some sub-publisher or the library itself is now making AI derivatives of your work without your permission, but it's work for hire. So you assign everything over to them, for example. So I think that would be a good question. It's like, what's your stance on AI?
Yeah.
Not personally, what's your personal stance, but what is your company's stance?
That's right.
Just to make sure it's not, being sent off and being done. And, I think I mentioned to you before, I had an AI company call me right before the pandemic. So quite a while ago. End of 2019 with my other catalog asking if I would voluntarily let them use my catalog to train their AI. And their response was, we're not trying to replace you. What we're trying to do is generate something so we can sell, if you're a composer, you have a deadline, you go in there and you type something in and it generates something and you're like close and then you hit regenerate and it gives you something you like. You can pay us $50 and then you can own that. Right. And I said, okay, that's an interesting model. That's a different approach. I can see that is, they said, that way you have like a foundation, you can start on it, you can start adding whatever you need to it, blah, blah, blah. Right. My question to them was, can you 100% with confidence, put it in writing, back up or guarantee that anything that your AI program generates will not infringe any third-party copyrights? And they said, well, no. And I said, then it's entirely useless to me and to most composers.
Yeah.
Because, when you sign a deal, one of the things that's in the deal is a certificate of authorship, which is basically stating, that thing, you guarantee everything's 100% original, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of slippery slope stuff with it. So I would recommend, if you're signing with a catalog, just to ask what their official stance is, and maybe even have them insert that into the agreement if it makes sense to do so, or what have you.
But in the meantime, we should handle AI as if we are handling sweaty dynamite with nitroglycerin gloves while trying to balance a jug of gasoline on our heads. That's how careful we should be.
Yeah, it's more or less like, I don't know if it's that extreme, but it's probably like maybe you want to step 20 feet away from your drunk uncle with the firecracker in his hand, when they're in the 4th of July. Maybe it's more that.
That's good. Yeah.
You lose a few fingers, not good.
I think we have to stay hip to it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go away. But if we just ignore it, it's definitely not going away. But if we can try to be part of helping to steer, and this is what I really appreciate what PMA is doing and Morgan and everything, is not being afraid to talk about it, but also not just calling it the devil and just like launching it into the sun.
No.
Yep.
I mean, it's the same thing when drum machines first came about, and drummers were like, oh, great, and then then DAWs came around and, then studios were using them, but then people started recording out this homes and then studios started closing, right? So it's a matter of, I think on those things, like that's progress. I think the stuff with AI is when you take an expression, like what was this meme I saw the other day? It was totally true. It's like, I want AI to like wash my dishes, do my laundry and manage my, paying my bills and stuff. So I have time to create music. I don't want it to be the other way around where it's creating my music and I have to just basically end up just washing dishes somewhere.
No, that's the truth. Right. Yeah. That is absolutely the truth. Well, that conversation definitely is going to continue. I don't see it tamping down and it'll be interesting. We live in very interesting times. And I imagine this is what the 15th century monks felt when the printing press, Gutenberg started saying like, you know what, we're going to make it to where you don't have to hand copy the Bible, and we're going to mass produce it, and suddenly the poor folks can get their hands on the Word of God.
That's
and
right.
Suddenly
you're back to baking bread, monk.
That's right.
That's all you're going to do.
Once again, a huge word of thanks to Timothy for joining me today on the podcast. And we'll be sure to have links to part 1 that you can check out. But yeah, Tim's awesome. Love Tim. I'm sure he will be back on this show. So we are going to take a super quick break, but when we return, we are going to take a listen to Waiting Hard, which is a cinematic tension cue written by 52 Cues friend Russ Westfield. We'll be right back. Every week I talk about how this episode and the podcast and the community, the channel, would not be possible without the amazing support of our family, friends, and neighbors, subscribers of 52 Cues, who do pay their actual real-life money to keep all of this going. And in addition to being thriving members of the community, as well as supporting me and Shannon and everything that we're doing here, they also receive extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video archives, weekly cue breakdowns, production music almanac, living ebook, and the opportunities to submit to real music libraries. Now, it's free to join 52 Cues. You can just go to 52cues.com and sign up, be a member of the community. We would love to have you. It will always be free to join the community. But if you've been watching, or if maybe this is your first time, but if you're wondering, is there a way to kind of level up my production music skills in the industry, meeting like-minded, super friendly, very generous composers? Then why don't you think about subscribing? Memberships start at around $4 a month, and we would love to have you. Again, that's 52cues.com. So that was Waiting Hard from Russ Westfield. Russ, thank you so much for sending this along. I really enjoyed this. I like that it was kind of a trailer cue, and he said about the cue. He said tension cue that evolves from an ethereal, atmospheric opening with sparse piano and haunting synth pads into a powerful cinematic high with thunderous percussion. The track moves to an eerie and emotionally charged close, perfect for suspenseful moments, dramatic storytelling, or high-stake sequences. By the way, that's a perfect metadata description, and I'm not sure if that was the intent or not, but no, that is a perfectly executed metadata entry for the description. But I did enjoy this. I read the description before I actually listened to it. And so I imagine the library or a music supervisor would kind of do the same thing. They're going to make assumptions about what they're about to hear. And so when I saw kind of ethereal, atmospheric with sparse piano and haunting pads, I kind of had in my mind's ear what I was going to hear. And for the most part, we're there except for the pizzicato strings. And I don't know if, I'm just programmed to think pizzicato dramedy or whatever. I thought it brought kind of a levity to the cue that I don't necessarily think you were going for. I'm a little worried that the pizzicato is betraying the word haunting or ethereal. So what can we do in lieu of this? Well, we could put it on the piano, and I would make it twice as slow. So instead of bum, 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 I know that's where it's going, but if we can go bum, 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 bum. And another note about that ostinato, it's pretty darn pervasive throughout the entire cue, which isn't a problem. Having recurring ostinatos is not a problem, but having a recurring ostinato that is only 2 notes throughout the entire 2 minutes and 40 seconds, 2:45, I think it needs a little bit more zhuzh to it, and so. And it might be as simple as switching out some of the pitches, So instead of just that kind of minor third, right? Boom. What if we bum 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 bum. Then you go back to the bum bum. But I feel like we just shift a few notes here and there, and it won't sound so repetitive. Some really nice string programming here. Nice job with like your portamentos and everything. I think that is working out. I think we could probably do more with some of the expression programming, which I can tell you have, but I think we could let those breathe in and out a little bit more. I like that piano. Yeah, so the piano is doing the thing that I feel like maybe our ostinato should do. You do bring some low end. I would probably bring the low end here, probably in this phrase. And just I feel like it took a little too long. We're a minute in before we really get much below 100 hertz or so. That's so nice. And I love the subtle introduction of a swing here, because up till this point, we're just 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what we're thinking this whole time. 1, 2, 3, 4. But then we have the beam, ba bum 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 bum. It's such a subversive way to say triplets are coming, and so that's really nicely done. And let's put a reverse or something into this edit point. This is a nice edit point. We have some brass, crescendos. But if we get a reverse or a cymbal swell or something. Yeah, and it really wasn't until this moment that I thought, those two notes over and over, I think, are need some tweaking. And who knows? It could be that we keep the two-note ostinato going until our Act 3 here, and then we do the shifts, especially since now we're going ba 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 ba. Yeah, and don't go bump ba doop ba doop. We're not turning it into that. I think this is all working. Those little kind of sounds. I'm not a fan of those. I would pull those down in the mix a little bit. Yeah, they sound kind of just splatty. I'm not sure. And at this point, I felt like we needed a harmonic shift, right? And so my recommendation, let's see, we are in D minor here. So we're doing that. I would go to the 6. It's so tropey, and everybody who listened to my feedback rolling their eyes right now because it just works. Something like that here at the end of Act 3, because we need to turn the heat up. We need to heighten the emotion, but, we're running out of room. We're running out of room in our instrumentation. We don't want to just slap a bunch of stuff on there, and we're running out of room in our mix. If we look here, we can see that the transients are starting to disappear. We're running the risk of getting into flat topping, and that's what I call when the transients are so extreme that it just creates a flat top across the waveform, aka the toothpaste waveform. So if we can make a harmonic shift here, then that will accomplish the emotional heightening without necessarily having to just add a bunch of stuff to it. Let's see what we can. Then up to the and then we're there. So we could go bum bum, right? So the B flat bum to the G. So 6 6 4 7. That's kind of what we could do. Let's see what that sounds like. So we're gonna go 6 6 to the 4, and then to the 7. Something there at this spot. This is about a minute 56. Just so we can have another emotional gear that we can go into. Let's talk about this trumpet. It's a little loud, and the timing is a little off right in through here. Yeah, and it's really good. It's actually pretty convincing. If that's a MIDI trumpet, I think we're in pretty good shape here. And then another kind of reverse or a cymbal swell. Since this is very comfortably orchestral, cymbal swell into a choke. And I think here, either bring your ostinato out more and bring the sustain sounds down, or leave it out altogether, because it is kind of disappearing. And I feel like that was a choice, kind of a decrescendo down. I get that. It's actually nice. All right. So that's really, really nice job. The last thing that I'll say is, if we're looking at our edit points, we kind of have 3 cliffhangers. And so at no point do we have a 1 chord. So a couple of different ways that we can fix that. We can either fix it coming out of an act break, which this is really effective. This is going into Act 3. Or we can add a final tonic. Edit point, boom. Nothing huge, but just boom, low piano, hitting, and just, there's my final. Because if this is going to be used for a trailer, then there's a title card and coming this summer or whatever. And so you'd want to give them one kind of final tonic note, I think is helpful. As far as the mix, like I said, we're getting pretty dense here. I think we're in pretty good shape. Some of the percussion stuff is getting a little loud, and the overall loudness it's pushing -10, -9 luffs. So I would watch out for that. But otherwise, like I said, just a little thick. I don't know if we need to go in and be a little bit more surgical with our low end, so that our low percussion, and especially the reverbs coming out of stringed instruments, can really just kind of bounce around the place in the low end, and then against, if you're running a sub bass and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, this was fantastic, man. I really did enjoy this, and thank you so much for sending that along. And if you'd like to get your own cue reviewed right here on the podcast, then you can submit them in our weekly feedback threads over at 52 Cues. And it's a great way to get insights from your fellow composers, and you never know, I just might feature it right here in a future episode. But if you're looking for more in-depth personalized feedback, I also offer 15-minute video reviews where I go through your cue, talk about what's working, suggest ways to make it even stronger, just like you saw here today. You can order one up by heading over to 52cues.com/feedback. And if you like this kind of feedback and you're wanting it on a regular basis, we do this every single week for our family subscribers. So that's going to do it for us this week. Be sure to tune in next week, because we are returning for a live Q&A. I'm going live on Tuesday, February 6th at 4 p.m. Eastern for an Ask Me Anything, where I'm going to be taking your questions about production music, sync licensing, composing, production workflow, whatever is on your mind. If you've got a question, then be sure to tune in, and you can either drop it in the chat, or if you're not able to attend live, you can write that and ask me ahead of time. Again, that is Tuesday, February 6th at 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube, and it's going to be hitting the podcast feed that following day. So I hope you've had an amazing week as we put the final touches on January of 2025. And I know that you're going to have an amazing week next week. How do I know that, friends? Because I trust and believe that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2025 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community, submitting your cue for review, or becoming a member subscriber of 52 Cues, head over to 52cues.com.